Today on Larry King Now, Steve Austin, the former wrestling star, on Life Out of the Ring.
And finally, I woke up one day and I said, you know what? You're 40 years old. You need to be productive. You need to go find a job.
On just how stone cold is the real Steve Austin. You like being a good guy?
In life, yes. I like to think that I am.
And what made him the biggest wrestling star in America?
I was never the best looking. I was never the best technical wrestler. But I worked my ass off at enough things that I became the best.
It's all next on Larry King Now. Welcome to Larry King Now. Our special guest, Steve Austin. You know him as Stone Cold Steve Austin, six-time World Wrestling Federation champ and WWE Hall of Famer. How did the name Stone Cold come about?
Well, the name Stone Cold happened back in the day. I was wrestling as Steve Austin. And then one of the guys that I was traveling with gave me the name Stunning Steve Austin.
Stunning Steve.
Yeah.
You were a great-looking guy, right?
Back in, when I had long hair, didn't have the goatee, I was a pretty good-looking cat. So anyway, I lose the job, I get fired. It's time to come up with a new identity. You know, and when I went to, that's when Vince McMahon from WWF back in the day gave me a call, and I was going to go in, and they wanted to bring me in as the ringmaster. So I went in as the ringmaster, but I knew going in that was just a foot in the door, that the ringmaster didn't have staying power, didn't have legs. You were never going to see that as a marquee name on anything.
Correct.
Hard to merchandise the ringmaster. So, you know, I watched a special on a serial killer, Richard Kuklinski. I came up with the concept of just a cold-blooded, ruthless heel, you know, because he was known as the Iceman. I pitched the office all these ideas, and they came back with names like Fang McFrost, Otto Von Ruthless, and Ice Dagger, temperature-based names.
I like that.
But anyway, I was very frustrated. My wife at the time was from England, and at the time she made me a cup of hot tea. She put it on the table, and she said, well, don't worry about it. You'll come up with something. Just go ahead and drink your tea before it gets stone cold. That's your name, Stone Cold Steve Austin. So that's how that name was born.
Wow. So you were a villain.
I was a villain when I first broke into business in Dallas, Texas.
But villains don't become champions, do they?
Well, yeah, they can.
They can?
Yes, absolutely they can, because
I'm shocked
ultimately,
at that, Steve.
But ultimately, Larry, that good guy has to come back and defeat that villain, and that puts the babyface or the good guy at a higher place. And so many different changes would happen along the road. And when I first, you know, started getting real hot as Stone Cold Steve Austin, I was a heel, but I was starting to become cheered more than the baby faces I was working with. So that's when Vince gets the idea, hey, we need to transition this guy into a good guy, or baby face, as we would say in the business. And through a match with Bret the Hitman Hart in WrestleMania 13, we executed a double turn where he went in as the baby face, left on the way to being a heel. I went in as a heel and left on the way to being a baby face. And ultimately ended up in my peak as Stone Cold as a babyface or good guy.
You like being a good guy?
Yes and no. In life, yes.
But you're a good guy.
Yeah, I'm a good guy. I like to think that I am. You got to work hard for everything. In the wrestling business, I always like being the heel or the villain, because seemingly you just had more freedom, more creative liberty to push the envelope in different directions.
As actors would rather play villains than...
Right.
Were you an athlete?
Oh, yes, I was. I was an athlete all through high school and specialized in throwing the discus and track, and went to the state level. And I got, you know, 4 free years of education.
Where?
Playing college football. 2 years in a junior college outside of Houston, and then 2 years at North Texas State University. And not good enough to play pro football, but good enough to get a free education. But
like The Rock, were you an actor?
No, I was not an actor. I was probably the hottest thing on 2 feet back in the day when Nash Bridges started calling, you know, WWF and saying, hey, we'd like to have Steve on the show. So I did about 10 or 11 episodes of Nash Bridges, and I just would go, and we were on the road all the time.
That was a great show.
It was a great show, and Don Johnson was absolutely wonderful.
The best.
So I was working about 300 days a year on the road. They'd fly me into San Fran. I'd shoot out in about 3 to 5 days and get back on the road. So fast forward all the years until I retired to get out of the ring, and I stayed unemployed or did nothing for about 2 or 3 years, kind of finding out what I was going to do next. And finally I woke up one day and I said, you know what? You're 40 years old. You need to be productive. You need to go find a job. I didn't want to go back to driving a forklift and loading and unloading trucks like I did before I got into business. So I said, take your ass out to Hollywood and get in the acting business. That's when I turned to acting.
I see. Why'd you quit wrestling?
Man, it was just a buildup of accumulation of a lot of injuries. I got dropped on my head in about 97. I was a transit quadriplegic for about 90 seconds there in the middle of the ring in front of 20,000 people live on pay-per-view. And I was thinking at that time, as I was laying there looking up at the lights, that I was going to be the next Christopher Reeve. Christopher Reeve had just gotten paralyzed. So anyway, it was just a buildup of injuries. And finally, the writing was on the wall that, hey, this is the part of the movie where you need to ride off into the sunset.
What's your MO now? Well, who is Steve Austin now? You host the show. We're going to talk in the next segment about Redneck Island. You have your own interview show. Who are you?
Who am I?
Yeah, you've always been someone.
Yeah, I think
who's the real Steve?
The real Steve is a guy just like anybody else walking on the street. I was a guy who came from, my dad sold insurance when I was growing up. My mom was more like an interior decorator. She hung wallpaper. And we were very middle class, growing up in a small town in South Texas. I've never been a guy who's been out of the ordinary. But, once I set my sights on something, and as far as a competitive environment or arena goes, as in football, they say you have to have a killer instinct. That's my competitive mindset when I do anything. I want to be the best. When I got to be the best in the world of professional wrestling, I was never the most talented. I was never the best looking. I was never the best technical wrestler, but I worked my ass off at enough things to have enough things going for me that I became the best. So Steve Austin is merely a guy now who realized his dreams as a kid to be a professional wrestler, who took it to the highest level, who, when I got dealt a different set of cards, played the other cards, came out here, found success in the movies, hosting reality television, which I love, and now hosting my own podcast, The Steve Austin Show, in which I get to talk to people just as Steve Austin, and from the roads that I've been down, the things that I've learned, the lessons I've learned, the dues I've paid, to ask them. In many ways, I'm a beginner at the Larry King level on a podcast, and I'm not even close to lacing your shoes, but that's who Steve Austin is right now.
And you're a lot tougher than I am. Coming up, Steve, on why he's proud to be a redneck and how you can be one too. That's next. It's a takeoff on Survivor, right?
I think there's elements of Survivor in there. We don't like to use the Survivor word because we like to think that we are our own living, breathing.
Well, you are what you are.
Yeah, we are what we are.
But it's a group of rednecks competing for a $100,000 cash prize on an island. Who came up with this?
I don't know who came up with it, but when they did come up with it, and CMT said, "Hey, we got to do this show," I was kind of the first name that came to mind to host this show. Perfect. And I don't think they could, and I don't want to blow a bunch of smoke, but I don't think they could have picked a better host for this island than me.
Are you a redneck?
I think I am.
Can anyone be a redneck?
Anybody can be a redneck.
What makes a good redneck?
Anybody that loves the outdoors, has an appreciation for the outdoors, hunts, fishes, enjoys the simple things in life, and makes the most of whatever you have.
You've got a ranch called Broken Skull located in South Texas. You spend your time between LA and Texas. You never fly, but you drive your RV everywhere. Is that it? Yeah.
My wife and I, we have our RV. We just sold it. We're right now we're doing our due diligence and our research to buy another rig. And we had a few mechanical issues with the other one. We don't like to fly because our dogs are our babies. My wife and I are dog people, and now we have two labs. I have a chocolate lab and a black lab, and we will not fly them underneath the plane. So we travel with them, and that's why we drive back and forth.
How's the Redneck Show is a big hit, right?
It is. I think it's the #1 show on country music television. I love being in business with these guys. It's a great demo for me, and it's a great fit. And, we never rest on our laurels. You always want to strive and go for bigger and better things. So with this season, last year we set a premier record for our season premiere. This year, I'm hoping that we'll break that, and the show will do even higher numbers. So I'm very happy, but not satisfied yet with what we have.
Where do contestants come from?
The contestants come from all over the place in the South. Many this season come from Kentucky, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, Texas, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi. Most of these have been from the South. I'm looking forward to when we have some from
Northern.
Wisconsin, from the Northeast.
Maybe a Jewish guy
Maine.
from New York.
Hey, absolutely. Hey, I want to be able to push this thing to be as big as it can be.
All right, you Broken Skull. How'd you name that?
I got one for you.
That's the name of the ranch. You're a weird guy, Steve. Go ahead.
I'm a weird guy,
Okay.
and I
Oh, I
got
mean that
told
as a
that by
compliment.
Larry King, so it must be
That's
true.
a compliment.
Yeah.
In the weird, in the best sense.
Oh, I know. So anyway, I wrestled for about, give or take, 15 years. And I'd always been wanting to buy a ranch in South Texas. I should have bought years before I did when prices were cheaper. But being that, as it was, I bought the ranch. And anytime you buy a ranch, you got to have a cool name for it. And I figured, with everything that I had to do to buy this place, I literally had to break my skull. So that's why I called it the Broken Skull Ranch.
You're a hunter, right?
Yes, sir, proudly so.
You think hunting's misinterpreted? Is it a sport? I mean, the animal don't have a chance, does he?
Well, it all depends on, what you determine a sport. I mean, is it a sporting event? No, but it is, man versus, I'm a white-tailed deer guy, so it's me trying to outsmart that white-tailed deer.
But you have a gun.
Well, absolutely.
The white-tailed deer.
And I'm getting into
Those
I'm
legs.
getting into more archery stuff. But
Oh, really?
It's funny because my wife is a vegetarian, and owning my ranch, it's a lot of deer management. We're trying to grow a big deer, and all of my deer are native South Texas deer. And so my wife is not going to shoot anything. She's not going to kill anything, and she's not going to eat any meat. But she can go to her deer stand, and she can have her binoculars and her camera, and she can enjoy the place and the process as much as I can without killing. As far as the killing or the taking of an animal's life goes, I'm a responsible hunter. I make a responsible shot. I eat what I kill. So I stand up for my rights as a hunter, and I'm very proud to be a hunter.
What do you make of gun control?
The gun control issue is an ongoing nightmare to me. Most of the people who are doing to me, a lot of the random stuff or stupid things with guns these days, I don't know that a background check would catch them.
So what stronger measures would you take?
You know what? If you commit a gun crime in the United States, I think you ought to be punished to the nth degree. Quick
What they
and
do in
fast.
England.
Well,
England, if you use a gun in the commitment of a crime, it tacks on 5 years no matter what it was.
Right.
Whereas you go into a 7-Eleven, never take the gun out of your pocket, rob a candy bar, 5 more years just for having a gun.
right. Hey, man, when there is a serious repercussion to be had, people pay attention
Eye for
a little
eye.
bit more quickly. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth.
Coming up, Steve will sound off on the state of pro wrestling today. That's right after the break. We're back with Steve Austin, Stone Cold Steve Austin. He hosts Country Music Television's hit competition series, Redneck Island, and has his own podcast show. I'm going to go on that show, right?
If you'll be on will you be on the Steve Austin show?
Yes.
All right, we're going to book it.
Okay. You book big name guests and all kinds of people every.
Yeah, and
walk of
I've only
life?
got about 13 episodes, maybe 15 episodes under my belt so far. And part of that time I was in Mexico working. So a lot of times, and I didn't even have any internet when that was going on. So a lot of times I've just got to work with what I've got to create a show, because when you have a content deadline, you've got to turn something in. But to answer your question, people like you and all walks of life, absolutely.
I'm going to enjoy doing it. Okay. Oh, you got a favorite wrestler today? Someone in the Steve mode?
I don't know if there's
There'll
anybody.
never be another Steve.
I don't think there'll ever be another Steve guy. I currently like, right now, I think John Cena's the face of the company. But if I had
He's
to
a
say
good guy.
one guy, I got to go CM Punk.
Yeah?
I like the attitude. I like what he does in the ring. He's very creative. He's very safe. He's very entertaining.
You were noted for your stunner, right?
Yes, sir.
What was that move?
It's
Don't
basically-
do it to me.
I know. Basically, the setup was a kick to the gut to kind of bend them over and put them in position. And then I would turn to them and put their chin on my shoulder, grab the back of their head. I would drop down and sit on my butt in a rapid fire fashion. So when I hit, they basically jolted their bottom of their chin and their throat on my shoulder. Very effective.
You're all friends, aren't you? Didn't it hurt to hurt someone?
Well, most of the
guys
time,
get hurt,
most
right?
time it didn't hurt, but do guys get hurt in the ring? Absolutely. When you got guys in there 250 pounds plus flying around those rings, and sometimes you've been on the road for weeks and weeks at a time, and timing gets off, and things happen as they do. And anytime you're dealing with gravity and the laws of physics, and you don't always land flat, and sometimes you start landing in stages, that's when the whips occur, and that's when things start getting messed up.
Do you ever? I know it's show business. I know I've been to Monday nights. I know it's kind of rehearsed. Have you ever been in the ring where the crowd's going nuts and you get a little nuts that forget about everything else? You want to really trample this guy, where it goes beyond that into really harmful things.
No, absolutely.
Never happened.
No, absolutely honest.
You always keep in mind show.
Oh, yes, yes.
Wow.
It is a show, because if it was out of the mindset, then I would have been in the UFC or MMA. But it's all about the show. It's all about taking that crowd on a ride. And that's where the psychology comes in, because, you do something to elicit a response. Based on that response, you proceed accordingly. So it's a thinking man's game out there. The guys that are successful in that business are very smart guys. Don't mean they can't screw up in life, but they're very smart guys and have a feel and an ear for that audience.
And you knew how to be a character, right? You had to stay in. You were stone cold.
When it finally turned out to what Stone Cold actually was, it was like I said earlier.
Yeah.
It was just far as me in a competitive environment, turning my volume from 1 to 10.
I'll name some wrestlers. What do you think of Hulk? You like Hulk Hogan, right?
Oh, one of the greatest of all time.
John Cena, terrific.
Tremendous young man, great.
Bill Goldberg.
Oh, I love Bill Goldberg. He's a good friend of mine.
Wrestler, right?
Oh, yeah. He was kind of cut from the same cloth
One
as
of my
me.
guys. Huh?
Yeah.
I grew up with a lot of guys. Not one became a wrestler.
Oh, and plus, Bill was one of the most strongest, powerful guys to ever be in the business, and a sweetheart of a guy. I just talked to him the other day.
The Undertaker.
Oh, the Phenom. Absolutely incredible run and a legend.
Triple H.
The cerebral assassin.
The
One of the guys,
cerebral assassin.
You got to love it. A guy that I love being in the ring with, because he's such a ring general.
And Randy Orton.
Up and coming. I think that he kind of peaked out there for a little bit, but I think he has another level to take it to. And so if Randy sees this is my challenge to Randy to step it up one notch, because you can go further.
Is everything okay with you and your ex-wife?
Oh, everything that I know of. See how I did that?
Of course, when that Benoit thing happened, that was terrible.
Oh, that was just an absolute. Yeah, it was just.
You knew him?
A tragedy. He was one of the most wonderful human beings I've ever met in my life. Whatever happened in the house that day will forever tarnish who and what he was.
We did a whole show that night.
Yeah.
We had Vince on and the rest. And
I remember. I remember I was going to be a part of that show and couldn't. But when that whole situation went down, it was a shock across the world to anybody that knew him. And of course, in and of itself, it was shocking. So, his career, his legacy will be forever tarnished because of that.
The wrestling changed a lot since you started?
Absolutely, it has. I remember growing up when I was 7 or 8, changing channels on TV and coming across Houston wrestling. It was a dark arena with just a light bulb over the ring, smoky. You could only see the second or third row. 2 guys were in there. It was before all the exposés. This is when wrestling was real.
How about Ted Turner? He did it in a studio at TBS.
Oh, it was great.
Inside a studio.
Yeah, it was great. Then all the things happened. John Stossel interviews, Geraldo Rivera, all the exposés, and then Vince finally does a smart thing and comes out of the closet, so to speak, and calls it sports entertainment. And it is today what it is. I loved the organic nature of it back in the day. Sometimes I think it may be a little bit overproduced these days, but showbiz is showbiz. And so the same changes that have happened in professional wrestling have happened in baseball, in football, in hockey, and that's just the way things go. Sometimes I long for the years back, especially in the mid-'80s and the NWAs and the Carolinas, that stuff and the stuff that Bill Watts was doing out of Tulsa. But I still love the business today, and I appreciate the guys and gals in the ring giving it their all, trying to perfect their craft and entertain the crowd. So
you loved your career. You got no regrets over wrestling.
I think there was one time when I no-showed a billing because I didn't like the creative, and that was probably the biggest mistake I ever made in my wrestling career. If I could go back in time, I would have changed that one decision, but sometimes when you get out of bed, sometimes you move a little slow. But in anything you do, whatever you do is going to catch up with you. I have no regrets. I had a blast. I have so many good memories. When I first got out, I missed it. it was like I was in withdrawal, and I missed the business. But now that I'm done with it and I've moved on, I just have great memories.
Hey, when we come back, Stone Cold takes your questions. We got tons of them. Be right back. As we said, we got flooded with social media questions for our special guest, Steve Austin. He hosts Redneck Island on CMT. Here we go. O'Kella Anthony on Facebook. Who was your role model growing up as a child?
Role model. I can't really say a role model, but I just say I really looked up to John Wayne.
Not a Kazoo on Reddit wants to know, when you were starting out in the wrestling business, what was the hardest thing for you to learn?
The psychology, just learning how to push buttons and pull strings.
Nana Ikenen Adu wants to know, who was your greatest opponent?
Probably Bret the Hitman Hart or The Rock, and that's
Bret the Hitman Hart?
Bret the Hitman Hart, one of the greatest of all time.
And he was hard he was rough for you in the ring?
Oh, no, he's one of my favorites.
Merciless Blue Shell on Reddit asks, how did you come up with the Austin 316 catchphrase?
Basically, it was a tournament-style pay-per-view. It was King of the Ring. The first guy I wrestled kicked me in the mouth. I had to go to the hospital and get 14 stitches in my upper lip. When I came back in the ambulance, the pay-per-view was still going on. A guy came and informed me that I was going to wrestle Jake the Snake Roberts in the final for the King of the Ring. At the time, Jake was going around giving religious testimonies. I was informed that he cut a religious promo on me. As soon as I heard that, and I was in a heel mode, I was the bad guy, I knew that when I beat him, because I knew what the finish was going to be, that I was going to say something in reference to John 3:16 and say Austin 3:16 says I just whipped your ass. It was totally spontaneous, and had no one told me that he had cut that promo, Austin 3:16 would have never been born.
That's the New Testament. Simply Sausages on Reddit wants to know, do you have any real backstage heat with any other wrestlers?
No, there's going to be times and places where you're in a bad mood and things are going kind of rough, and maybe the same guy's in the same situation. And sometimes you're going to work with guys you'd rather not work with, but at the end of the day, you always go to the ring to protect the person you're in the ring with. Your life is in their hands and vice versa. When it all comes down to it, you're there for longevity. If you get sent home due to an injury, you don't make money. So you always go to the ring with the aspect of taking care of who you're performing with.
Demetrius 1975 asks, if you could go back and change one event that happened during your wrestling career, what would it be?
That one event I referred to is when I was going to lose a match to Brock Lesnar and didn't like the creative and decided to take my ball and go home, as they said. So that would be the one.
Phil Rock 60 on Instagram. If you were to have one last match in WWE, who would you want as your opponent?
That's a great question. CM Punk.
Glenn Harrop on Facebook asks, would you come back to wrestling to have a match with CM Punk?
I would consider it, but all the stars would have to be aligned. It would have to be good for them. It would have to be great for me.
Spastic Hero on Reddit wants to know if you regret leaving WWE.
No, I do not regret leaving. I did what I had to do, and I moved on down the road and forged another life.
And V170 on Reddit wants to know, what exactly is the bottom line?
Hey, the bottom line is whatever I say it is on how I feel passionately about a subject. I am very happy to be on the Larry King Show, and that's the bottom line.
Okay, we finished with a game called If You Only Knew. Well, do you have a guilty pleasure we don't know about?
I don't think I do.
Favorite pastime?
Hunting.
First person you ever kissed?
My first girlfriend.
What was her name?
Kathy.
How old were you?
16, 17.
16?
Hey, man, I was a shy kid, Larry.
You 14, you never kissed a girl in the
No,
back
I
of the
didn't. I was shy, believe it or not.
Whatever happened to Kathy?
Married and divorced.
Oh.
Next question.
Worst thing you've ever been called?
Oh, the worst thing I've ever been called, I cannot say on this show.
When you were a bad guy, the crowd hated you, right?
Yes.
Was that fun to have to make?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you're there to be hated, you want to be hated. If you're there to be loved, you want to be loved. You don't want that in between. All or nothing.
What scares you in life? Are you scared of anything? Snakes, anything?
Well, I don't like snakes. I don't swim in the ocean. I live right by the ocean out here in L.A., but I don't swim because I don't want to get my leg bit off by a shark. I have a fear of sharks. I did my first research paper on sharks.
Good thing to fear.
Yeah.
You know why?
Why?
Sharks don't care.
They don't.
I've never interviewed a shark, but I have the opinion they don't care.
If I got one on the sand, I wouldn't have such a problem with him. But in the water, in his element, that's his ball game.
That's right. Best piece of advice you ever got?
Always let a cooler head prevail.
Proudest moment?
Making my parents proud in anything I did, working hard to live up to the standards that they set for me.
And is there something no one knows about you?
Well, I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is.
You're a great
I love want to drop that dime here.
You're the best, man. Thanks to my guest, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Catch Redneck Island every Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern on CMT. And you can download his podcast, The Steve Austin Show, on iTunes and at podcast1.com. And remember, you can find me on Twitter at King's Things. And that's the bottom line, because Larry King said so.